So I got a question, still staying on kind of music. You tell this story a few times, and I never really understood the story, and maybe you can help me out with that, about you and Cactus Jack. And I'm going to tell you a quick story. I had a girlfriend because my last name is Walsh, and she used to be, let's say, friendly with the guys from Kansas. And I think she thought I was...
I know Steve Walsh is. My God, are you kidding?
Yeah, and she was a little bit older than me, but she was a gorgeous former stripper redhead. And for some reason, she thought I was in with them at first. And I said, no, I never even met them. Just a coincidence. But ended up being a great girlfriend. But anyway, when she would get in a weird mood, she'd put on this song by Tori Amos, Happy Worker. And she got all offended with me if I didn't dig the song. And I didn't really dig the song, but she played it. And you tell the story about you and Cactus Jack and you playing a song that Tori Amos did. I don't really understand what the story was about smashing in the windshield. Could you kind of clue me in on what that story is?
So Mick and I love Mick Foley. I will say this over and over again to this day. It's one of the most discouraging times of my life when he ended our relationship. I've already started to talk about the truth and why that is. It's a pretty heavy fucking story.
Oh man, I'm sorry.
But I love doing the road with Mick. I did. Jack and I and I've heard Jack tell this story, but he doesn't remember it the right way. He says the song that I introduced him to was Cornflake Girl, and it wasn't. So we were traveling, and he had this old, it was a Chrysler K car or a New Yorker that was just a piece of shit. And he and I, and that's why he loved me, because I didn't give a shit. I would do the road with him, and I had this car that I'd been given by Marty Jannetty. That was my 79 Lincoln that I named Miss Christine, that I drove all over the South when I was in WCW. I had it in Memphis, Tennessee with me, and or in WCW in Atlanta. I got it from Memphis, from Marty and Sean, actually. It blew up in front of the hotel we were staying at. I bought an engine for it and drove it back to Utah, and then I drove it back to the South to do my WCW tenure with. So anyway, Mick had this piece of shit Chrysler, and we were doing the road, and it had a cassette deck that barely worked, and the stereo barely worked, and it sounded like shit in the car. But we would drive down the road, and I would introduce him. He loved, part of the reason he liked doing the road with me is I constantly introduced him to music, and most of the shit I was listening to at the time was heavy metal, right? And
right.
He got really bored, one day, and he goes, dude, I like your heavy stuff, Max. Don't get me wrong. He's kind of a come to Jesus meeting with me. He says, have you got something else that just, is not quite so demobilizing, for God's sakes? And I said, yeah, I do. And so I had just discovered, and I don't even remember how, I had just discovered Tori Amos. And I think it was because of it's an EP called Crucify. Do you know this EP?
I do not know the EP, but I have heard you tell the story about the song that it was, the cover.
You know what I'm going to say. So basically, it's an EP of, I think Cornflake Girl is on the EP, but it's actually it's a cover album. It's got a Led Zeppelin cover on it. I think there's a Stones cover on it, and in fact, I'll look it up while we're talking. It was actually a cover of "Smells Like Teen Spirit," and it is. If you haven't heard it, you owe it to yourself, James, to go listen to this. I'm fucking not shitting you. If you have never heard Tori's cover of "Smells Like Teen Spirit," it is truly one of the most haunting versions, and of course Kurt had just died, you know, and so or maybe he wasn't even dead yet, you know, and it was amazing, and yeah, the album is called Crucify, and let me see if I can tell you the exact songs that are on it. But anyway, so we started listening to this song, right? Mm-hmm. And I look over at Mick, and the tears are just streaming down his face. It's that emotional of a song. It really is. You know, it's yeah. There is a Rolling Stone. So the songs on the album are the song "Crucified," the song "Winter." "Winter" is a great Tori Amos song. She does "Angie." She does "Smells
by
Like"
the Rolling Stones.
Yep, by the Rolling Stones. She does "Smells Like Teen Spirit" on it, and she does "Thank You" by Led Zeppelin. And the song "Winter" actually is. I think if there was the Tori Amos original that he listened to on the album, the one that he liked the most, it wasn't Cornflake. He always says Cornflake Girl. It wasn't Cornflake Girl. It was "Winter" was the song that we listened to that was her own, you know, but we listened to the whole thing. But I'll never forget, man, the opening chord progression of when you hear "Smells Like Teen Spirit," you're not prepared because, you know, you're so used to that. You know, that fucking riff is like Smoke on the Water, isn't it? You know? The actual Nirvana song, you can never forget "Smells Like Teen Spirit." And when
I always wondered how WCW didn't get sued, because DDP's theme was such the exact same thing. It wasn't even like
exactly.
it deviated, right? Yeah.
And the way they didn't get sued is because, honestly, even though what Kurt did, you know, that's the thing about rock and roll is, fuck, when you start suing over shit like that. I mean, most rock artists now too, you listen to them, they will just flat out tell you. I've heard Eddie Van Halen talk about it. I mean, I'll tell you where most of my music comes from. There's a bunch of songs that I've written that are going to come out with my movie that, you know, their influence, when I tell you them, you'll go, oh my fucking God, you know, and it, you know, it's amazing, but that's just the way rock and roll is. You know, you can't, I'll put it this way. Richie Blackmore said something that I've carried with me my whole life. He said, no one can play anything original. It doesn't exist. All you can do is play you, which is the way you have stolen from everybody. What makes you uniquely you is the way you have stolen from all the influences in your life. And that's so true. I just completely 100. You can't play anything original in your head because your brain is filled with all the fucking musical influences of your life, you know? So when you start to recite things and you start writing music, I know this because I've written songs that all of a sudden I wrote songs that I wrote in 15 minutes, and I would get done with them and I'd go, where in the fuck did that come from? You know? And so that's the magic of it. So anyway, when you hear the "Smells Like Teen Spirit" version of Tori Amos, right. I mean, it doesn't sound. I mean, it doesn't even remotely resemble Nirvana. You'd never, right. If you just heard the opening chord progression of "Smells Like Teen Spirit" from Tori Amos up to where she says the first word, you'd have no idea what it is. And if you haven't heard it, you owe it to yourself to go listen to it. So anyway, that's the true story behind the discovery of. And then he went on to be this huge Tori Amos fan. He ended up meeting her and going backstage. God, I think he's got a key to her house, for God's sakes. I mean, I know he's like the biggest Tori Amos fan in the world. I know that for a fact.
Yep. Wow, well, that's really cool. What was the windshield thing? Somebody smashed somebody's face in the windshield or something?
So I'll tell you what it was. So we were at Disney doing the Disney run with the WCW, and this is when Mick and I we were untapped. I mean, we really. That's why I was so crushed when Mick left me. You know, I thought, oh my God, we were just. I really thought that if I would have stayed with Mick, we would have ended up with the belts and we would have done some major shit. But it wasn't to be. But he comes to me one day and he goes, Max, I've got this great idea for an interview. He goes, just roll with me on it. And that was the way we would work. You know, he would give me the basis of the idea, and then I would go on with, I'd let him take, that was my part of the darkness of the tag team. Mick was the guy that had the bang, bang, mentality, and my shit was always dark and weird, and that's what people loved about the tag team. I mean, that's what the announcers loved to talk about. Bobby Heenan loved to make fun of us, how fucking crazy we were together,
Right. And he had some great calls with you guys, too.
They what?
He had some great calls with you guys.
He was awesome. Yeah. Yeah. And so we were, Mick goes out there and tells him the story that I just told you. And the tears, he goes, and the tears are running down Max's, they're running down my cheek. And Maxx Payne, being the good friend he was, did the only rightful thing he should have done at that exact moment. Very gently reached over, grabbed my head, and smashed it into the dashboard. And said, "What are you doing? Don't be such a pussy," or something like that. It was that mentality. So that's where where I smashed his head into the dashboard and said, "Stop it!
There you
Stop
go.
crying, you big baby." Basically. So that was that was the crux of the story. It's not, it was all based on this interview we ended up doing at Disney, and I think that interview is, quite frankly, I think it's out there. I think you can.
It is. I think so.
You really.
I would definitely remember seeing it when it aired. So, but I thought that was a real story. Like, oh, one of you slammed your face in the windshield or something.
Oh no, I didn't. No, I never. No, I didn't really smash his head into the dashboard.
All right. Well, we got to mention the Nasty Boys. I've heard you do it in other interviews. We don't have to make it a lengthy story, but those, ironically, are some of the matches that people remember most from you guys in WCW, you and Cactus Jack. Was your matches with the Nasty Boys? I guess it's because they were quite so stiff and real, but what was your thoughts on those matches and how hardcore it got? Because remember, this is before ECW really caught fire, so hardcore was not palatable, but you guys were really stiff and kind of hardcore, maybe Memphis concession stand brawl kind of material.
Despite what Knobs set forth to do to me, another moment in my life where I got blamed for something I didn't do. It was Knobs' fault, and he can say what he wants, and we've talked about it, and I've said to him publicly, and to both him and Jerry's face, I warned you what was going to happen, and you chose not to listen to me and to not trust me. And Brian got hurt that night, and if you go watch how he got hurt, you can see that I trapped his left arm, and I was trying to throw him over his left arm. And he decided he was going to control the fucking bump. And I threw Vader like that. Mm-hmm. And I told him, this particular evening, we were in Albany, Georgia, and I went over because Mick and they were all planning the fucking match and weren't going to include me again in the planning. And I went over to him and I said, because quite frankly, I didn't get my shit in. I never got to put my 2 cents worth in to what was going to happen. And I went over this night. I said, no, that's not what's going to happen tonight. What's going to happen tonight is I'm going to throw you. We're going to do this, and this, because you guys do this every time we have a match, and you don't ever fucking include me. You leave me sitting over here. You don't include me. So tonight I'm going to get my shit in, and you're either going to go with me, or you'll pay the price for not going with me. I basically said it that way because you come to a point in time in the wrestling business where, the Nasty Boys, they're notorious, and anybody who knows what I'm saying is true. Is what I'm about to say. It's true. They were stiff as fuck, and usually their shit, Arn Anderson used to say this all the time, they're stiff as fuck and their stuff looks like shit, and that was always the irony of working with the Nasty Boys. But because they were the Nasty Boys, they were just fucking over as fuck heels. That's just who they are. And, I will also be the first to tell you that I fucking love Brian Knobbs and I love Jerry Sachs. I always loved both of them with all my heart. That was always the problem, is because they were my kind of people. They were fucking druggies, and we were all druggies together. And, Mick didn't party, And then on top of that, they loved the fucking whole music playing thing that Nick Patrick and I were basically road mates and would jam together in every hotel room we went to. And they would come to our room and fucking sit and listen to us play the guitar for hours. And Jerry would leave and Brian would stay. Brian sat for hours with us and listened to us play the guitars. And
so Joe Hamilton's a rocker guy? I would have pictured him more as a Southern kind of guy.
Oh, fucking Joe is, man, that's a whole nother fucking realm in and of itself. He was in my band.
Really?
He was absolutely influential, and when I went to WCW, fucking Sting hooked me up with him immediately, and we were friends immediately, and he had a little fucking storage shed down in Jonesboro, Georgia, where we'd go down and fucking jam on, every time we were home, we'd go to his storage shed, get fucking blasted and fucking jam for hours and hours, play fucking Aerosmith and Leonard Skinner and fucking Metallica and, Nick's a hell of a guitar player, one hell of a guitar player. And he ended up being the rhythm. So if you obviously haven't heard the stories about Living Insanity in my band. So
no, I have not, no.
You don't know any of it?
No.
Wow, that's it. You don't know nothing about Steve Miller or any of that.
I did have a question about Steve Miller. That was going to be about you and Vince McMahon and things like that, because I heard you mention his name in passing. Are we talking about like the Joker, Steve Miller, or are we talking about different Steve Miller?
We're talking about the Joker.
Wow, you're kidding. Wow.
So,
okay.
It's funny because, so you're going to want, we might want to try and do more.
Part two. Right, exactly.
Because I can't get, it'd take me because to really tell you, because you'll listen to the story because it's amazing. It really is an amazingly fucking, it's huge.
Maybe when that movie comes out, we'll have you on and I'll get that story out of you.
Well, and then the Mick Foley part of the Steve Miller story is huge because there's a video evidence that proves the story that I would tell you that goes with it. So anyway, it suffices.
And he's more than just the Joker. There's Jungle Love. There's any number of songs. But there you go.
Jesus Christ. Well, yeah, you got to go. You just got to go with the Joker because that's just probably the most famous fucking bass line in the history of fucking rock and roll, right?
Exactly right.
So it's a very complex story because from the time you know what? I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to let you continue to ask questions.
Okay, cool. Yeah.
And then because you got an agenda, let me fulfill your agenda first because there's with Nick Patrick in the mix, that only continues on with what I wanted to accomplish was I knew I had an album I had to write and I had to finish while I was in WCW because I was writing a soundtrack for a movie I hadn't made yet. And I knew I was going to make this movie, so I needed to get the soundtrack done. I did not see the WWF coming. I really envisioned I was going to stay in the WCW, but then things changed because of circumstances outside of my control, and Mick Foley was hugely responsible for a lot of those changes. And so, it's a whole epic in and of itself that you especially will appreciate because of the rock and roll side of it.
Yeah.
So the
absolutely.
drummer I told you about, my friend from Utah that I grew up with in Utah, was actually I'd known him since I was in fourth grade. So, that drummer friend of mine, we went to college together. We're still friends to this day. He came to Atlanta. I brought another friend that I'd met in Nashville to Atlanta. And then Road Dogg, Brian James, ended up, in the end, was the singer. And when the movie comes out, all of my music that I wrote and recorded in Atlanta with Brian James as the lead singer will be the soundtrack for this movie that's going to finally come out. So
awesome.
But ironically, I wrote the soundtrack before I shot the movie.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about WWF, because obviously we have to. The people listening want to hear that. The Maxx Payne character, especially towards the end with Cactus, you were kind of starting to look a little bit more, maybe a little bit more Rob Zombie-ish, a little darker, a little, ominous. And then Man Mountain Rock is more, tie-dye, and I don't know. It just seemed like it was a change in the presentation from Maxx Payne to Man Mountain Rock. Was it a change that you initiated, or was it kind of what they wanted you to do?
This is another, I'm going to credit Mick Foley again for saying something that was so true, is for whatever reason, by now, the powers that be behind the scenes with me were dead set on defrocking me. Now, I don't know why. And I don't know why they tried to claim that it was because the Maxx Payne character was too much like Undertaker, and I just couldn't do that. And if I look back and have one regret in the wrestling business, is that I didn't walk out of negotiations with Vince and be the Maxx Payne character. I really wish I would have said no. This is one time I wish they would have said no. I'm not doing that, and you're not going to tell me what to do with this character. You're going to help me. You're going to hire people that want to help me develop this character, because I know what I'm doing here. I know heavy metal kids, and heavy metal kids will love this fucking character. So I'm not a tie-dye guy. I never was a tie-dye guy. I like tie-dye shirts, don't get me wrong, but I'll be fucked if I wanted to be a fucking wrestling character in tie-dye.
Okay.
And excuse me. By then, I had some serious power against me by this time in my career, and they were bound and determined to destroy me. Quite frankly, this is one of those moments you don't have to believe me. The great thing about it is when my movie finally comes out, the Kliq openly make fun of me on videotape. My videotape, you can see how bad they hate me. They make it, Triple H, Nash, Hall, it's really evident how much these guys hated me. And so, when you live with that, you've seen the results of what being defrocked by those guys did. There's a lot of people that lost their lives because of how they were treated by those guys in the WWF. They can think what they want to, and those people have a lot. I'm not suggesting that they have a smoking gun in their hand, but I'm also suggesting, and I would say it to their face, when you treat people the way they treated people, it's no surprise that somebody that devoted their entire fucking life to making a living as a wrestler would take their own life because they were completely and utterly destroyed in public. It's no surprise that people lost their lives because of the way they were treated by the Kliq. And I was one of those guys. I just happened to have a big enough ego and a big enough fear of God that I couldn't take my own life because of it. But I'm telling you, I was that kind of depressed. I've never been back to the business. All I ever wanted was to be in the WWF. And more than anything, all I ever wanted to be was behind the scenes in the WWF, to be honest with you. And to this day, I've never understood how a guy with, a degree in television and film that, all I wanted to do was help and be creative in the background with the WWF. they never give me another opportunity. They've forgiven every fucking other person that's walked through their doors and done bullshit, but for some reason, I'm the dirtiest, ugliest thing that ever walked through the WWF's doors. And I don't live with that. You know, I don't have a choice. I've had to for 30 years. It doesn't,
right.
you know, when I left the wrestling business, I never got another fucking call from anybody.
Well, that was my next question is your look kind of could have fit in a place like ECW, and certainly your style could have. I mean, Big Dick Dudley comes to mind. He wore tie-dye shirts. He had the wild hair and stuff. So it kind of would have fit in. You could have been a Dudley. You could have been something like that.
There were people behind the scenes, and I really don't want to mention names. You put it together yourself, but you need to know more of the story that happened. For example, the Steve Miller story and how Mick Foley fits into that. And there were a lot of other people, because I never even got a call from Paul. Not once. And you would have thought, I mean, exactly my point. You know, like the NWO. I mean, who would have how fucking perfect would it have been to have Maxx Payne character write and play the fucking theme for the NWO, walking them to the ring. But and then ironically, the guy that produced all of my T-shirts years before the NWO made their T-shirts. And in fact, if you look at my T-shirts, you'll see WFO on my T-shirts everywhere. Ironically, WFO, NWO, you know, no coincidence there. On top of the fact, the guy that the NWO used to be their T-shirt manufacturer is the guy that custom made my T-shirts for me. A guy named McWilliams out of Chicago, and he ended up going to Atlanta to be the T-shirt manufacturer for the NWO.
Wow.
And he got his start as a heavy metal T-shirt guy. And I really believe to this day, I'll tell you what, I really believe to this day, one time I wore a T-shirt that had his 800 number on the back of it. And I really believe that Eric Bischoff took that telephone number.
Really? Wow.
And I'm sure he would just call me the pathetic liar that I am, that, you know, giving myself credit for something I don't deserve credit for. But you know what? Anybody who doesn't believe that there was somebody that looked like the NWO long before the NWO, go watch any Maxx Payne match. I mean, I was wearing I looked just like I looked just like the NWO.
I can see that. Yeah, you're right.
You know, long black hair, fucking skulls and crossbones everywhere. I mean, I was doing the black number one. I mean, Taker, of course, Taker was Taker, but Taker didn't wear T-shirts. Taker didn't wear heavy metal. He wore Taker. He was Taker. You know, he didn't go out there wearing fucking T-shirts. He went out there wearing his Taker garb. And, you know, the fucking gloves and all the shit that he did. You know, that's why Taker's so fucking magical, is because he was a heavy metal guy without actually having to do that, you know? And that's why I always believed my character was so different. I'm nothing like Taker. Never was. Didn't work like him. Didn't act like him. Didn't do anything like that. And
the only thing was that he wore black. That's really it.
Yeah, and so, that was the part. Anyway, when I went to the WWE, then the hardest part for me, James, was really the worst part of the WWF was that not only did they take the Maxx Payne character away from me, then Jim Johnston.
That's what I was going to ask you, yeah.
Jim Johnston made it clear that my shit sucked and that he didn't want anything to do with my fucking music, that he was going to be. And so all of the music that accompanied Man Mountain Rock, the backing tracks and everything, except for when I would go to the ring playing the guitar, all of it was done by Jim Johnston, and I fucking hated it. He used this thing called a doubler on the guitar to get. He had about as much fucking clue what it took to get a good heavy metal sound as fucking Dolly Parton does. You know, I hated with a capital fucking H the sound Jim Johnston would use to represent Man Mountain Rock. It wasn't cool blues. It wasn't cool metal. It just sounded like shit. And every idea that I had, like I had this idea of standing there, and the video's out there, of standing in front of this wall of speakers, like in Back to the Future, that one big speaker. I wanted to stand in front of this big wall, like a stack of Marshalls, and it's him playing the guitar. And I would watch that shit, and it would just, you want to talk about fucking take everything that you believe and stand for away from you. And then the creme de la creme was one night, Vince was bound and determined to get me to play in MSG in front of the MSG crowd. That was the moment when everybody was going to fucking decide whether my gimmick was going to fucking be successful or not. You know, I got one shot at it. You go out there, and if the crowd in Madison Square Garden cheers for me, well, then I fucking win. And I go there, and I go out and try to play in Madison Square. They've got, now, this is Madison Square Garden. They give me one Marshall and one fourplex to play over.
I've been there many times. I lived in New Jersey, so MSG was kind of my hangout for the WWF shows. And yeah, I know what you mean. That's not going to cut it in a 22,000 seat venue.
On top of that, they want me to play over the live fucking PA system. You know how much of a delay there is over the live PA system? I don't give a fuck who you are. You cannot play over a live PA system. And I begged Vince. I said, Vince, I do not want to do this, because I knew it was going to fail. I knew from the minute I didn't like the tone of the guitar amp that they'd given me. I didn't like the fucking setup. I could not hear myself through the speakers. And I said, this is going to fail, Vince. Please, I don't want to do this. And he said, you're going to go out there and you're going to do this. And I said, it's not going to work. And I went out there, and it's the only time in the history of my gimmick I was only ever booed once.
Oh, man.
MSG, because the crowd started fucking making noise, and I couldn't hear myself play. And it sounded like fucking absolute shit. And so they made fun of me because, you know, if Vince would have put me out there in MSG with a professional sound stage like a rock and roll band, so I would have had monitors in front of me and had professionals, you know, making sure that the fucking system was designed so that instead of being the live PA, like when they do fucking big, you know, Monday Night Raw shows where they fly in their own PA system and don't use the house system and do it like a rock and roll thing, which is what the whole point of what I was doing was. That I was a legit fucking rock and roll guy, I'd have blown their fucking minds that night. But instead, he puts me out there and it embarrasses me. It fucking failed miserably. And it just continued. That was you know what that was, brother? It was just another fucking horrible cog in the downward spiral of the Maxx Payne character.
You mentioned that you were done after WWF. You didn't want to, you know, do it anymore. You needed to get out of there. I just had on Dan Spivey, who was Waylon Mercy, and he was, for different reasons, his body had broken down and all that. But he said much the same thing. Movie. Is he? Okay, there you go. I just had him on a couple months ago, and he was saying the same thing, that it was just, I wish I could have stayed longer, but I was done. And he didn't have any desire to continue doing it. Was it just the Kliq, or was it the environment, or what was it about the WWF at that time that kind of just made people go, you know what, forget it? Well,
it was Steve Miller, and it was Steve Miller that cost me my career in the WWF.
Wow. We're going to have to get that story one day.
It was the rock star Steve Miller that cost me. And in the end, Mick Foley was somewhat responsible for that too.
Oh, man.
I mean, I don't know how to say it. I love Mick. I'm not trying to bury him, and I never have. But I'm not going to stay silent anymore, because first of all, my movie's going to come out, and people are going to want to know the truth. And the truth is out there. You can see the interview with with Mick Foley and Steve Miller on the Jimmy Kimmel Show. I have it. I'd love to send you a link so you can see it for yourself. That's what I should probably do. So I should probably give you a link to the fucking Steve Miller interview, and then you can decide for yourself, you know, because most people, when I tell them Steve Miller was involved, to go, you know, I hear a lot of wrestlers and they're full of shit and they lie and everything else.
Sensationalized stories and things.
They sensationalize stories. I'll let you watch the Steve Miller interview on Jimmy Kimmel with Mick Foley, and you can decide for yourself, you know, how fucking full of shit I am. Because and if you listen carefully, Steve Miller will tell you the exact story that I would tell you, and I would give you the full details of what happened.
Right.
But Steve Miller, in the end, is what cost me. But I don't want. Let's put it this way: Steve Miller wasn't the only reason, but it was the final nail in the coffin.
Very cool. All right, so I'm gonna get you this. We'll wrap up here because I kept you way longer than I promised you, and I'm so sorry about that.
You don't have to apologize, brother. No need.
Just a couple questions about what you're doing now. What are you up to now? When is this movie going to come out, and maybe a book and things like that?
Well, I'm still working on it. It's turned over. Completely washed my hands of it that way because it needs to be in somebody else's hands, and so somebody else is going to take care of getting the movie out. So I can't give you definitive dates because I don't know yet. But I will tell you this. I do know for a fact that it will be out within the next 6 months to a year because just the nature of the deal that we made, it's going to come out. And because he's always loved the story behind it and why I shot the movie. I really shot the movie to prove to Vince that given the opportunity, my gimmick that failed in Madison Square Garden, that given the opportunity, I wanted Vince to see how it would work because he never got to see how it would work. He never got to see what it felt like to feel the pop. Vince never felt it, to feel the pop of what it was like to have a wrestler that could go out there and play and entertain a crowd. And so because of fate in this movie, I end up with the opportunity to play in front of, which they weren't going to let me play in Europe. But had it not been for an incident between Owen Hart and Louis Muccioli, God rest both their souls, I wouldn't have played in Europe on the Full Metal tour. It was called the Full Metal
Right, it was
tour.
called the Full. They had the album out too, the Full Metal album, with the theme music and all that. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and it was all because of me. That whole thing was going to be because of me, and then they were going to let me play, and I took my guitar with me, but I already knew when I was on that tour, I was done with the WWF. That was like my 2-week notice because of Steve Miller. They decided at last minute that they wanted me to go because they'd booked me and I was in the program, and they felt that they were going to let the crowd down because they couldn't. You know what it is? I'll bet you money it boiled down to the cost of reprinting the programs without me in it. So they had me in the program, and they just didn't want to reprint the thing. I'd already done tons of promo for the Full Metal tour, and so they let me go on this last tour. And I asked Vince before I left, can I take a video camera with me? And he said yes. And anybody that knows anything about the WWF knows that I wouldn't have shot 10 seconds of fucking video if Vince wouldn't have given me the permission. And Tony Gurria, I'll never forget this. Tony Gurria, fucking, when I walked off the plane or showed up it was in one of the lounges or something at the very beginning of the movie when I first get to where all the boys are and I start shooting the video. The first thing Tony Gurria says to me is he says, turn that fucking thing off. And I said, Vince gave me permission to do it. And I said, he goes, no, he didn't. I said, fucking, yes, he did. He goes, I'll be right back. Of course, what did he do? Went to call Vince. And he come back and he said, Vince said, okay. And so for 2 weeks, I shot what is now going to be the thing that is going to be called the thing that should not be, and the thing that should not be was me. And so I shot this movie. I wanted Vince to see that he was letting, in my opinion, tremendous potential go. He was letting something go, you know, and this is what I said to Gurria when Louis Muccioli got hurt on that tour. Mm-hmm. I'll tell you a little bit about what happened really quickly. Is, you know, when somebody gets hurt on a tour, what do they do to cover the time? Well, they usually do a battle royal. Mm. And usually crowds, they like them, but they know it's fucking space filler. Anybody who knows anything about wrestling knows that if you see a battle royal, it's because a couple of wrestlers didn't show up or somebody got hurt and couldn't work. So in order to fill 15 minutes of time, everybody has to stay and do a battle royal. So that's what they were going to fucking do in these house shows. They were going to do a battle royal. So I walked up to Tony Gurria and I looked at him because Lewis had, I think Lewis actually went home because his eyes were swollen shut. Owen Hart accidentally sprayed cologne in Louis Muccioli's eyes.
Oh man. Okay.
And his eye, he was allergic to something in Drakkar Noir and in his eyes, and his eyes literally, it gave him hives and his eyes swelled shut, and he had to go to the hospital, and he couldn't work. He couldn't see. And that's who I was working with, right? So, of course, everybody was fucking grumbling and bitching and moaning, oh, my God, we got to do a battle royal, and rightfully so. You know, the last thing you want to do is fucking keep your gear on all goddamn night if you're wrestling on the first fucking match, right?
Right.
So I walked up to Tony Gurria, and I looked at him, and I said, you know, it's obvious you motherfuckers aren't going to let me play, but I said, you do realize, Tony, that you do have a guy on this card that can give you 15 minutes without an opponent. And he looked at me and he goes, what do you mean? And I said, why don't you let me go out there and fucking play for 15 minutes? Then you don't have to do the fucking battle royal. Mm-hmm. And he goes, I'll be right back. You know where he was going to call Vince. You know,
call Vince, right? Yeah.
So he went and called Vince, and he came back and he said, Vince said okay. And so for the last 5 dates of the tour, they let me play, and I went out there and I filled 15 minutes, and every single fucking night I was first guy out, right? And I just go out there and improvise and play, and I'm no virtuoso, and it's, you know, I'd never done that before, never. So I go out there and I play, and fucking crowds going nuts. Every night they would go nuts. And I don't know if you know how much you know about Germany, but the great thrill of when you get an encore in Germany or German-speaking countries, they chant this thing. They chant, "Du ga ben, du ga ben, du ga ben." It means do it again.
Do it again. Okay.
Yeah, and it's so fucking thrilling if you're a performer, right? Like if you fucking do a big slam or, you know, something happens in a match in Germany, they start chanting "Zu Gaben," right? And every night when I would play, you know, I had 2 backtracks that I'd written and recorded myself in my recording studio. And I'd recorded these backing tracks that I had with me. And every night I would go out there and I would fucking play these, I would play for the crowd for about 15 minutes, and nobody had to, you know, nobody fucking ever thanked me for that, but nobody ever had to work a battle royal because of that. So for the last 5 nights, I went out and played, and then I would ask the ring guy, I said to him, hey dude, will you record me playing in the ring? And so he recorded me playing in the ring, so it goes along with it. I did that so that I could prove to Vince that he could see once and for all that what I was doing would actually could be successful. Give me the opportunity, develop it with me, with my ideas, with me, right? Take all the other bullshit equations out of it, fucking Shawn Michaels and Triple H and fucking Nash and Hall and all their fucking backstabbing bullshit, you know, because they're the Kliq running the fucking WWF. And they, posthumously, that part of what I said was really right. I was really wrong about the fucking mighty will fall. They never fell. They have never fell. They
and unfortunately now they're in charge.
Now that's what I was just going to say. They still run it to this fucking day. He married Vince's daughter, and fucking now he's going to inherit the company. You know, so it's one of those things that I was really, really wrong about that part of what I said. Yeah. But you know, in the movie, but the nice part about it is you at least get to see my emotions worn on a sleeve. But you get to see me succeed at exactly what I said could be successful. And that's all I ever wanted to prove to Vince, is if you would have given me the real opportunity to be the guy that was playing the music, to be the guy that was standing in front of the crowd with the right kind of PA and the right kind of system, with the backing track so I could hear what I was doing, it would be successful. People will love it. It never failed when it was done the right way. I never got booed except for that one time when I begged him not to do it in Madison Square Garden. And that's the part that always crushed me about the Man Mountain Rock character, or the Maxx Payne character, is it never ever got to go to its potential, and that always.
Yeah, me too. And I'm going to let you in on a little story. This will be the last question, but because I know I kept you way too long, and I did. I apologize for that.
Stop, man! You're not bothering me. I'm enjoying the shit out sitting here talking to you.
All right. So my first job in wrestling was writing for just a emailed newsletter, and the guy who ran it, his AOL screen name was Maxx Payne 1. And he and I got along. This was 1995. This is the first time I did anything in wrestling. And he ran it, and he ended up having, thousands of subscribers for this thing, and it was pretty cool. And I remember the last time I talked to him, I started to work on another site that was being run by the Z-Man Tom Zink, as a matter of fact.
First match in the WCW.
There you go. Yeah, but I see this weird intertwines, but there you go. But last time I talked to him, we were talking about you. And I said, whatever happened to Maxx Payne? And he said, I sure don't know, but I wish I knew. Now, this is the days before Google. This is the days before podcasts. Right. For somebody like that was, such a big fan of yours, that had your name as his AOL identity, his AOL screen name, what kind of message do you want to leave for those guys? And like, what do you want to tell them? Where did Maxx Payne go? And basically, that's it. That's what would you like to say to those guys?
When I've thought about this, because I do have PTSD. I realize it every day of my life, because my life has been filled with shoulda, coulda, woulda, right? But I couldn't have done anything different. I tried, and at every turn, there comes a point where no matter what you do, you can see the failure. You can see the train going off the rails. And what I knew, I did go back to Europe after the WWF for a very brief, like a month, and I walked away from the business. I was done. And the reason I was so done is because I was so crushed that I'd gone to the show, and now I'm back in the minors. I'm back in the fucking here I was, in the show, and now I'm back in AA, and I'm like, it was crushing. And the other side of it was, I grew up and was born and raised in Utah. I was born and raised in the LDS Church, and I didn't choose that path for myself, but that doesn't take away from the fact I was born and raised into that ideology and ideological theology. And the number one theology in the Mormon Church, and anybody who's a Mormon knows, that the number one word that the Mormon Church teaches is family. And I came from a very, very, very strong mother and father, family value life, which I ignored to my own cost and detriment, and many times in my life. But I had managed then to keep my marriage together, and I still I had children that were about to hit high school age, and I decided that I didn't want my children to grow up and walk across the high school graduation stage without a father. And I was just telling this story to my current wife and her family just literally 2 days ago. I remember the last time my youngest daughter, all my kids went to the same grade school in a little town called Orem, Utah. It's not a little town anymore. It was then still. But my children all went to the same grade school, and I was at my youngest child is my daughter, and I was at her 6th grade Christmas party. And like Mick Foley listening to Tori Amos for the first time, was standing at the back of the audience, the very back of the building, and tears were just streaming down my cheeks because I knew that it was the last time I would ever go to a Christmas program for one of my children. It was the end of an era, and I was so fucking proud that I was standing there to see it. And I knew that had I continued on in the wrestling business, we wouldn't be having this conversation right now. I was destined to a fucking, I would just be another statistic of one of the boys who lost their lives, because I was heavy into painkillers. I was, I was miserable. I was fucking in pain all the time, and I was worn out. And I wrestled in college. I wrestled, all over the world, and I didn't want to climb in the ring any longer. I didn't want to. Just like Waylon Mercy said to you, I was done, and because I was done, I got to watch all my kids graduate from high school. I got to watch my second to the oldest son win a state championship wrestling match. I know for a fact when I say this, anybody that's in the WWF and spent their life in the WWF, there ain't one of them that can say that. Not one of them. They all missed their kids going to, crossing the stage at high school because they were all busy out on the road making a living. And, for that, I was thankful. Did I develop any wealth? Am I going to die with, not a big house and all of that shit? No. But at least when my life is over, I at least know that at that moment in time, I felt like I did the right thing by going home to take care of my family and watching them walk across the stage of graduating from high school and going out into the world, because my parents taught me one thing really valuable, that if you raise a child and they're not capable, this is the mentality I grew up with. If you raise a child and they're not capable of taking care of themselves in the world by the time they're 18 years old, you failed as a parent. And every one of my kids moved out of my house when they were 18 years old and couldn't wait to get out in the world and make their own way. And for that, I'm extremely proud, regardless of where I'm at with my relationships with any of my children now and my ex-wife and any of that. At the time, I made a huge sacrifice because I could have probably fought my way back in at some level. I really could have. If I would have really, really wanted to get back into the business, I probably could have. So, but I chose not to. And part of the reason is because I had been so fundamentally destroyed by the powers that be and the Kliq, and I'm too soft-hearted and too tender-hearted and I couldn't take it any longer. And I just said, enough's enough. And I went home and did the right thing at least in my humble opinion. I went home and watched my family grow up. And for that, I'm happy.
Very cool. Like I said a few minutes ago, man, I know sometimes when I do these interviews, like, this is going to be a good one. I'm going to have a connection with this guy. And I did not know this would be as good as it was. I want to thank you for taking so much time with me. And, man, when that movie does come out, please put me on the short list of interviews you will do, because I promise you I'll do everything I can to promote the heck out of it for you.
I look forward to it, James. Just get a hold of me, man. You know, people are going to... I have a feeling once it finally does come out, I'm going to be busy, but you know what? I'm just looking forward to doing it, because then I can, you know, if that's the moment when my story finally gets told, well, then it will have all been worth it. You know, if it takes, you know, the end justifies the means, and if it took 30 years for this story to be told and for that part of my life to come to manifestation, well, then so be it. And so I'd love to work with you again, and it was a pleasure doing this interview with you.
It really was a great pleasure for me, man. I'm a fan all my life, and I thank you so much. For some reason, I keep thinking, I want to say this to you before we hang up. I don't know why, but you're a good man, Charlie Brown. It's just like you are a good dude, and you need to know that. So I want you to,
thank you.
To know that.
That means a lot to me. I appreciate that.
All right, man. Thank you so much for taking the time. I will let you know when I get this up. And again, I'm so sorry for keeping you so long, but that was fantastic. Thank you.
Brother, you don't have to apologize. Honestly, I could have gone a couple more hours, so
I could too, but I don't think my wife is waiting for me to go to lunch with her.
Yeah, that's exactly my wife's waiting for me over on the other side of the house, so I get it. I completely understand.
This is Interactive Wrestling Radio.
Interactive Wrestling Radio. Interactive Wrestling Radio. Interactive Wrestling Radio. Interactive Wrestling Radio. Interactive Wrestling Radio. Interactive Wrestling Radio. Oh, Rush.
Featuring the interactive interview.
Interactive interview. Interactive interview. Interactive interview. Interactive interview. Interactive interview. Interactive interview. Oh, yeah.
Formerly The Blaze.
The Blaze. The Blaze. The Blaze. The Blaze. The Blaze. The Blaze. The Blaze. The Blaze. The Blaze. The Blaze rock.
You maniacs, so what you gonna do when the Blaze of Mania runs wild on you?
On WrestlingEpicenter.com.
Wrestling Epicenter.
Wrestling
Epicenter. Wrestling
Epicenter.
Wrestling Epicenter.
Wrestling Epicenter. The Wrestling Epicenter. Don't get off.
And now we shamelessly name drop from our history.
The Wrestling Epicenter would like to apologize for the following.
All right, everybody. Viva la raza. Viva la raza.
Hey, y'all.
Hello, ladies.
Hey, guys. We had a lovely conversation. First lady. Absolutely. Oh, look at me. She's so kooky.
Be there. Where else?
Interactive Wrestling Radio. Wrestling
Epicenter.
Oh, my God. You win. Wow. Being interactive.
Wow. I just got some listen. I was going to shoot him. Yeah, almost a fistful, man. Breaking neck. I got 2 words for you. I've heard a lot about you guys. I see my language. You're going to go to the shop. I see him now. We're into the many.
No nerves.
That was great. It's going to be cool. Woo. What it's all about. The purest point of view. The living legend. Champion. Arrogant.
You just make me.
Instead of statement, I'm talking to you.
So lonely without you.
In the land of extreme.
Testify. Nevermore. Interactive interview. I'm not just the best. Interactive interview with a plastic
You
head.
earned the right.
Nobody. You better keep listening. Thank you very much. Controversy creates cash. Professional wrestling.
Made in the USA, baby.
Memphis wrestling. The guy on fire.
We were sexy.
What a show.
One and only.
Interactive Wrestling Radio.
Wrestling
Epicenter. Interactive interview. We took care of the business and ballet. We are huge. You're where it's at. You better recognize who's the best. If you're smart, make sure to tune in each and every week. I'll come out of your computer, knock down your door, and turn it on for you. Or else I'm going to kick your stinking teeth in. And that's the bottom line. Have a nice day. It's showtime.
Don't forget to like and subscribe.